A woman screams as flames reach for her pregnant belly. Her husband watches from 30 feet away and turns his back. What looks like a tragic accident is actually cold-blooded conspiracy. But here's what her husband didn't expect: she survived. And survivors don't stay silent. This is the story of Claire Hutchinson, a woman who walked through fire, lost everything, and discovered that sometimes the only way to freedom is straight through the flames. Before we begin, if stories of courage inspire you, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe, because every week we bring you real stories of people who refuse to stay victims. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, 3 months before the fire. The security camera footage shows everything. Timestamp 11:42 p.m. A woman in white screams as flames reach toward her. A man in an expensive suit turns and walks away. The video cuts to black. But let me take you back. 3 months earlier, before the fire, before the fall, before everything burned to ash, Claire Hutchinson woke at 6 a.m. in her Malibu cliffside mansion, like she did every morning. 7 months pregnant, her belly made simple tasks exhausting. She moved carefully down the curved staircase, one hand on the marble banister, the other supporting her lower back. The kitchen gleamed with morning light reflecting off stainless steel appliances. She started the coffee maker, knowing Blake liked his ready by 6:30. 4 years of marriage had taught her his rhythms, or maybe it had taught her to disappear into them. Blake appeared at 6:28, phone already pressed to his ear. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit tailored to emphasize his athletic build. At 32, he looked like what he was: old money wrapped in new tech success. "The Shanghai deal closes Friday," he said into the phone, ignoring Claire's attempt at a smile. "I don't care what their team says. We hold firm on valuation." Claire placed his coffee on the counter. Black, no sugar. He grabbed it without looking at her and walked onto the terrace, still talking. Through the window, she watched the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly, beautiful and cold. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa, her best friend. "Coffee this week, need to see your face." Claire typed back, "Blake's hosting a party Saturday. Come." She didn't mention that she'd found a hotel receipt in Blake's jacket pocket the night before. The Sunset Tower Hotel, 3 nights last week when he told her he was in San Francisco. She'd confronted him gently, carefully, the way you approach a wild animal. "Why are you going through my things?" he'd said, his voice quiet but sharp. "It was a client meeting. You're being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones make you irrational. Claire, you know that." And just like that, the conversation became about her instability, not his lie. Now Blake returned from the terrace, pocketing his phone. "I'm announcing the Series C funding at a bonfire party here Saturday night. 60 guests, catering, full setup." Claire hesitated. "I'm due in 8 weeks. Maybe a smaller gathering." His jaw tightened. "This is my achievement. Claire, you'll be there. End of discussion." He left without kissing her goodbye. The door closed with a decisive click. Claire stood in the enormous kitchen, one hand on her belly where the baby kicked. She remembered their wedding 4 years ago, how he'd promised to build a life together. She'd been the director of a nonprofit supporting domestic violence survivors. She'd given it up when his startup began demanding all his time. "Just temporarily," she'd said, "until we're stable." Now his company was worth $200 million, and she couldn't remember the last time someone asked her opinion about anything that mattered. She called Vanessa. "He's having an affair," Claire said when her friend answered. No greeting, just truth. "Oh, honey," Vanessa's voice was soft. "Are you sure? I found hotel receipts. He's different, distant. And there's this woman, Sienna Drake. She's his brand consultant. I've seen how he looks at her." "What are you going to do?" Claire looked around the marble kitchen, the designer furniture, the original artwork. Everything beautiful and empty. "I don't know. I'm 7 months pregnant. Vanessa. I have no job, no income. He controls all our accounts. What am I supposed to do?" The question hung in the air like smoke. That night, while Blake worked late, Claire scrolled through Sienna Drake's Instagram. 26 years old, stunning in that effortless way of people who'd never known hardship. Her feed showed luxury hotels, designer clothes, and several photos tagged at Blake's company headquarters. One photo, Posted 2 weeks ago, made Claire's breath catch. Sienna at a restaurant. Champagne glass raised. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable Blake's profile. His distinctive watch, his hand reaching across the table. The caption read, "To new partnerships and beautiful beginnings." Claire's hands shook as she took a screenshot. Evidence? Proof. But proof of what? Exactly that she was right, that her perfect life was a lie. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if reminding her you're not alone. You have someone to protect now. She deleted the screenshot. Evidence could wait. Survival came first. But sometimes, in the cruel mathematics of power, survival and evidence are the same thing. Sienna Drake studied herself in the floor-length mirror of her West Hollywood loft. The red dress hugged every curve, the fabric expensive enough to whisper quality without shouting desperation. Perfect for what she had planned. Her phone buzzed. "Blake, tomorrow night, usual place. Can't stop thinking about you." She smiled. 3 months of careful planning, and everything was falling into place. Blake Hutchinson was exactly what she'd been looking for: wealthy, ambitious, and married to someone too weak to fight back. Sienna had researched Claire thoroughly. Former nonprofit director who'd abandoned her career. No family money, no powerful connections. Just a pregnant woman clinging to a man who had already moved on. The affair had started predictably. Sienna had been hired to rebrand Blake's tech company after their Series B funding. She'd made herself indispensable, working late, understanding his vision in ways Claire apparently couldn't. One late night became drinks, drinks became dinner, dinner became the Sunset Tower Hotel. "I married her when I was 28, Blake had told Sienna during one of their nights together. "I was different then. I thought love meant settling. But you understand ambition. Claire just wants me home for dinner." Sienna had nodded sympathetically while thinking, this is almost too easy. Now she texted back, "Can't wait. But Blake, we need to talk about Saturday." His response came quickly. "What about it?" "Your wife, at your celebration party. It looks wrong." "I'll handle Claire. Trust me." Sienna set down her phone. She'd handle Claire differently. She'd been waiting for the right moment. And Blake's bonfire party provided perfect opportunity. High-profile guests, media attention, and Claire visibly pregnant, visibly displaced. Sienna would make her position clear. After all, there was only room for one woman in Blake Hutchinson's life, and Sienna Drake didn't share. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa Cole sat in her apartment reviewing photos from Blake's recent company events. As an investigative journalist for a mid-sized LA publication, she'd covered the tech scene extensively. She knew Blake's type charismatic narcissists who treated people like acquisitions. She'd tried warning Claire years ago, but love made people blind. Now pregnancy made her friend trapped. Vanessa zoomed in on a photo from last month's product launch. Blake and Sienna stood close together, his hand on her lower back. The intimacy was unmistakable. She forwarded the photo to Claire with a message. "You're not crazy. You're right. Document everything. I love you." Then Vanessa did what she did best. She started digging. Blake Hutchinson's business history showed a pattern: aggressive acquisitions, ruthless negotiations, and several former partners who'd been legally prevented from speaking about their experiences. NDAs layered over NDAs. One former employee, a woman named Patricia Wells, had filed a complaint about hostile work environment before settling out of court. The details were sealed, but Vanessa had sources. She made a call. "Patricia, this is Vanessa Cole. I'm a journalist, and I'm looking into Blake Hutchinson. I know you signed an NDA, but I have reason to believe someone's in danger. Can we talk off the record?" The woman's voice was quiet. "I signed that NDA because I had no choice. He buried me in legal fees. But if someone's in danger, you need to know what he's capable of. Blake Hutchinson destroys anything that threatens his image." "Anyone. Can you give me specifics?" "Not over the phone, and not with my name attached. But I'll tell you this: if his wife is in his way, she should run. Now." The line went dead. Vanessa stared at her notes. She thought about calling Claire immediately. But what would she say? Your husband is dangerous based on a vague warning from an anonymous source? No. She needed real evidence. Saturday's party might provide exactly that. On Friday evening, Claire stood in the mansion's master closet, trying to find something appropriate to wear. Everything felt wrong. Too tight, too casual, too obviously maternity. Blake appeared in the doorway. Wear the blue dress, the one I bought you. It doesn't fit anymore. Then buy something new. I don't want you looking. He paused, searching for words. Neglected? I am neglected, Claire said quietly. His expression hardened. Don't start. Tomorrow is important to me. Can you, for once, just be supportive? I've been supportive for 4 years. Blake, I gave up my career, my identity, everything. What have you given up? He stepped closer. His voice dropped to that dangerous quiet she'd learned to fear. I've given you this house, this life, security. Do you think you could have any of this on a nonprofit salary? You should be grateful. I should be loved. Love. He laughed coldly. You're 29 years old. Claire, still believing in fairy tales. Love is for people who can't afford anything better. We have a partnership, a brand. Don't embarrass me tomorrow. He left. Claire sat on the closet floor, surrounded by designer clothes that felt like a uniform. She placed her hands on her belly and felt the baby move. We'll get through this, she whispered. I promise, Agnès. But promises made in golden cages are hard to keep when the door swings shut. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather. String lights hung across the mansion's terrace, reflecting off the infinity pool. The fire pit, custom built for the occasion, burned at the center of the gathering space, surrounded by leather seating and heated lamps. 60 guests in designer clothes held champagne glasses and traded insider information. Claire descended the stairs carefully, wearing a navy maternity dress she'd ordered online. Simple, elegant, forgettable. Exactly what Blake wanted. She recognized most of the guests, tech investors, company board members, a few minor celebrities who'd attached themselves to Blake's rising star. Everyone looked successful. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked like they belonged. Everyone except her. Claire, Vanessa appeared, pulling her into a careful hug. How are you holding up? I'm here. That's something. Listen, Vanessa lowered her voice. I'm going to keep my phone recording. If anything happens, anything at all, I'll have proof. Nothing's going to happen. It's just a party. But even as Claire said it, she saw Sienna Drake arrive. The red dress was like a declaration of war. Sienna moved through the crowd as if she owned it, accepting kisses on both cheeks, laughing at jokes, touching arms with practiced familiarity. And when her eyes found Blake, the entire party watched their chemistry ignite. Blake excused himself from a conversation with investors and met Sienna near the bar. They didn't embrace, didn't kiss, but their body language told the story clearly. He leaned in, said something that made her laugh, placed his hand briefly on her lower back. Claire felt every eye turn to her, gauging her reaction. She kept her face neutral, a skill she'd perfected over months of humiliation. Garrett Pierce, Blake's business partner, approached with concern in his eyes. Claire, I don't know what Blake's thinking. This is inappropriate. It's fine, she said automatically. No, it isn't. You're his wife. You're carrying his child. He shouldn't. Garrett, please. I just want to get through tonight. He nodded reluctantly and moved away, but his words stayed with her. Even Blake's business partner recognized how wrong this was. The evening progressed. Blake gave a speech about the company's success, thanking his team, his investors, his incredible support system. He mentioned Sienna by name, praised her vision, her dedication, her invaluable contributions. He didn't mention Claire once. Several guests filmed the speech on their phones. Tomorrow it would be on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Blake Hutchinson's triumph, with his pregnant wife erased from the narrative. Claire retreated to the far side of the terrace, near the fire pit where fewer people congregated. The flames were beautiful, mesmerizing, warm against the coastal night air. She needed a moment alone, just one moment to breathe. That's when Sienna found her. Claire, the younger woman's voice was smooth as silk over steel. We should talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Oh, I disagree. Sienna moved closer, her smile sharp. I think we have everything to discuss, like how long you're planning to keep pretending. Pretending what? That he still loves you, that this marriage means anything. Sienna gestured toward the party, where Blake held court among admirers. Look at him. Really look. He's happier than he's been in years. You should thank me for that. Claire's hands clenched. Thank you for destroying my marriage, for freeing him from a marriage that died years ago. You're just too pathetic to accept it. The word pathetic struck like a physical blow. Claire had been called many things during her marriage: too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding, but pathetic was new. I know what you think, Sienna continued, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think you're safe because you're pregnant, that he won't leave you while you're vulnerable. But Claire, he already has. Legally, you're still married, but in every way that matters, he's mine. The company, the house, the future, all mine. You're wrong, Claire said, but her voice shook. And I look around, everyone here knows, everyone sees what you refuse to acknowledge. You're not his wife anymore. You're just an obligation he's counting down until he can end. Claire felt tears threaten, but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this woman. I need you to understand something, Sienna said, stepping even closer. The fire pit crackled behind them. There's no happy ending for you here, Alma. He doesn't want you. He doesn't want that baby. And the sooner you accept that and disappear, the easier this will be for everyone. I'm not disappearing. This is my home and my marriage, Faye. Your home, Sienna laughed coldly. Everything here belongs to Blake. The house, the cars, the accounts. You own nothing. You are nothing. Something snapped inside Claire. 4 years of silence. 4 years of making herself smaller. 4 years of accepting crumbs while being told she was greedy for wanting bread. You know what? Claire's voice strengthened. I'm done. I'm done being silent. Done being invisible. Done letting people like you and Blake treat me like I don't matter. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. I'm exposing this affair, this whole sick situation. Everyone will know what kind of man he really is. Sienna's expression shifted. The smug superiority vanished, replaced by cold calculation. You're going to regret saying that, Sienna said quietly. Claire turned to walk away. Done with the conversation. Done with the party. Done with everything. That's when Sienna's hand shot out and shoved Claire's shoulder. Hard. Claire's feet tangled in her dress. Her balance, already precarious from pregnancy, gave way. She stumbled backward toward the fire pit, arms flailing for purchase that didn't exist. Time slowed. She saw the flames, felt the heat, heard her own scream echo across the terrace. Her dress caught an ember. Pain exploded across her left arm as she hit the scattered coals around the pit's edge. The smell of burning fabric and skin filled her nostrils. Voices erupted around her. Someone threw water. Hands pulled her away from the fire. Through the chaos and pain, Claire saw Blake. Their eyes met across 30 feet of terrace. She watched his face register shock, then calculation, then a decision. He walked toward Sienna, not toward his wife. He grabbed Sienna's arm and whispered urgently in her ear. Then he finally approached Claire, his face arranged in appropriate concern, fully aware that every phone in the vicinity was now filming. Call an ambulance, he said calmly. My wife has had an accident. An accident. The word burned worse than the flames. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Claire lay on a gurney, her left arm and leg covered in second-degree burns that screamed with every heartbeat. A fetal monitor beeped steadily beside her, tracking the baby's stress levels. Dr. Helen Cross, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and steady hands, examined the burns while a nurse administered pain medication. You're lucky, Dr. Cross said. The burns are serious, but mostly superficial. With proper treatment, they'll heal, but I'm concerned about stress on the baby. Your blood pressure is elevated, and the fetal heart rate shows distress. Is the baby okay? Claire's voice cracked. For now, yes, but Mrs. Hutchinson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. How did this happen? Claire opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the curtain pulled back. 2 police officers entered, followed by Blake and a man in an expensive suit Claire didn't recognize. Officers, Blake said, his voice perfectly modulated with concern. Thank you for coming. My wife had a terrible accident tonight. Pregnancy affects balance. You know, she stumbled near the fire pit at our home. Tragic. but purely accidental. Officer Morrison, a weathered man in his 40s, pulled out a notebook. Mrs. Hutchinson, can you tell us what happened? Claire looked at Blake. His expression was neutral, but his eyes held a warning. The man beside him, clearly a lawyer, watched her with predatory attention. Claire started. She's been under tremendous stress, Blake interrupted smoothly. The pregnancy has been difficult. Her hormones have made her emotional, sometimes irrational. I've been worried about her mental state. Dr. Cross's eyes narrowed. Mr. Hutchinson, I'm treating your wife. Let her speak. Of course. Blake stepped back, hands raised in apparent deference. But the damage was done. He'd planted the seed unstable wife, concerned husband. Claire felt the trap closing. If she accused Sienna of pushing her, Blake would claim pregnancy psychosis. He had witnesses who'd seen her alone by the fire pit. He had lawyers who'd destroy her credibility. And she had burns and terror and no proof. I tripped, she heard herself say. The words tasted like ash. I lost my balance. Officer Morrison wrote notes. Were you drinking, ma'am? No, I'm pregnant. Were you taking any medications that might affect coordination? Just prenatal vitamins. The questioning continued for another 10 minutes. Claire answered mechanically, watching her chance at truth slip away with every lie she told. Finally, the officers left, seemingly satisfied that this was exactly what Blake said. It was a tragic accident. When they were alone except for Dr. Cross, Blake's facade dropped slightly. I'm glad you're okay, he said, but his tone suggested he was really glad she'd cooperated. I'll have my assistant arrange for a private room. You'll stay here tonight for observation. Blake, we'll talk tomorrow. Claire, when you're feeling more rational. He left. The lawyer followed. Dr. Cross pulled up a chair beside Claire's bed. How long has he been abusing you? The directness shocked Claire. He doesn't hit me. Abuse isn't always physical. Mrs. Hutchinson, I've been an ER doctor for 27 years. I know what I'm seeing. The way he controlled that conversation, the way he undermined your credibility before you could speak, the way you're terrified of contradicting him. Tears finally broke through Claire's defenses. He's not always like this. When we first married, he was kind, attentive. It changed gradually. I kept thinking if I was better, more supportive, less needy, he'd love me again. That's what they all think, Dr. Cross said gently. And it's never true. That's a show. Mrs. Hutchinson, I'm legally required to report suspected abuse, but I also know that reporting can sometimes make things worse. So I'm going to give you some resources, and I'm going to document everything I've seen tonight. If you decide to leave, you'll have medical records supporting your case. She handed Claire a card for a women's shelter and a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence cases. I can't leave, Claire whispered. I have no money, no job. He controls everything. Then you need to start building an escape plan now. Document everything. Open a separate bank account if you can. Reach out to friends who can help. Because Mrs. Hutchinson, this won't get better. It only gets worse. After Dr. Cross left, Claire lay in the dark hospital room, listening to the steady beep of the fetal monitor. Her baby's heartbeat, constant and trusting. Her phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. I recorded everything, the whole party. I got her pushing you. We have proof. Hope flared in Claire's chest for the first time in hours. Proof, evidence, truth. She was about to respond when another text came through. This time from an unknown number. Saw what happened tonight. If you need help leaving him, I can provide resources. You're not alone. Patricia, Claire stared at the name. Patricia. Why did that sound familiar? Then she remembered Patricia Wells, the former employee who'd sued Blake's company years ago. The settlement had been sealed, but rumors had circulated about harassment and retaliation. Claire saved both numbers and finally responded to Vanessa. Come tomorrow morning, early, before Blake returns. She deleted the messages, paranoia making her cautious. Blake had access to their phone account. He could read every text, track every call. The golden cage, she was realizing, had bars she'd never even noticed. Outside her window, Los Angeles glittered with lights, millions of people living their lives, free and unmonitored. Claire pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby move. "I'll get us out," she whispered. "I promise." But promises made in hospital rooms are fragile things, easily shattered by men with lawyers and money and no conscience. Vanessa arrived at 7 a.m. carrying coffee and a laptop. She found Claire sitting up in bed, the burns on her arm freshly dressed, dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleep had been impossible. "Show me," Claire said without preamble. Vanessa opened her laptop and pulled up the video. Phone footage from the party, slightly shaky, but devastatingly clear. Sienna approaching Claire near the fire pit. Their conversation, too quiet to hear, but body language aggressive. Then Sienna's hand shooting out, the shove, Claire falling. "This is assault," Vanessa said. "Clear as day. We can take this to the police." Claire watched the video 3 times, memorizing every detail. "Send it to my email, the one Blake doesn't have access to." "You have a secret email." "I do now." Claire had created it at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, using the hospital's guest Wi-Fi instead of her personal phone. Small steps toward autonomy. Vanessa transferred the file, then hesitated. "Claire, there's something else. I did some digging into Blake's past. There's a pattern. A former employee named Patricia Wells sued him 5 years ago. The details are sealed, but I found Patricia. She's willing to talk." "She already contacted me," Claire said quietly. "Last night." "Then you know he's done this before. He destroys people who threaten him. You need to be careful. I'm 7 months pregnant, covered in burns, and trapped in a marriage with a man who watched me catch fire. How much more careful can I be?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Blake arrived at 8 a.m. with flowers and a representative from his legal team. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Andrea Brooks, carried a briefcase that felt ominous. "Vanessa, this is a private family matter," Blake said pointedly. "We need privacy." "I'm not leaving," Vanessa replied. "Actually," Andrea interjected smoothly, "Mrs. Hutchinson's medical decisions require consultation with her spouse. HIPAA regulations don't apply to friends she's invited to stay." Vanessa finished. "I know the law. I'm not leaving unless Claire asks me to." Claire looked at her friend, then at Blake. His expression was neutral, but she recognized the calculation behind his eyes. He was assessing the threat, determining the best approach. "It's fine," he said, smile returning. Vanessa's practically family. Andrea opened her briefcase. "Mrs. Hutchinson, we need to discuss last night. The incident has generated some unwanted media attention. Several guests posted videos online showing your fall. It's important we control the narrative." "Control the narrative," Claire repeated. "Yes, we're prepared to release a statement saying you tripped due to pregnancy-related balance issues. The company will cover all medical expenses, of course, and will handle any media inquiries. But we need your cooperation." "Cooperation meaning what?" "Meaning you'll confirm the official account, no contradictory statements, no interviews without approval. In exchange, you'll have access to the best care, a private recovery suite at home, whatever you need," Vanessa interjected. "And if she doesn't cooperate?" Andrea's smile was professional and cold. "Then we'll be forced to share our concerns about Mrs. Hutchinson's mental state. We have documentation of recent erratic behavior, emotional instability, and today's incident suggests possible pregnancy-related psychosis. No one wants that kind of publicity." The threat was clear. Cooperate or be destroyed. Claire felt the trap tightening. "I need to think about it." "Of course," Blake said smoothly. "Take all the time you need. We'll be back this afternoon." After they left, Vanessa exploded. "This is insane. They're blackmailing you. We have video evidence of assault, which they'll claim shows me stumbling while Sienna tried to help. Blake has unlimited money for lawyers who'll twist anything. I have burns and a baby and no resources. You have me. You have the truth. Truth doesn't matter if no one believes it." Claire's voice was hollow with exhaustion. "I've been thinking about this all night. Blake's been planning this. Maybe not the fire specifically, but getting rid of me. He's mentioned divorce before, but with the baby coming, it looks bad. A wife with mental health issues, though that's sympathetic. He's the devoted husband dealing with an unstable spouse. You're not unstable. But I will be if I fight this. They'll bury me in legal fees. drag me through courts, take my baby. You don't understand the kind of power Blake has. He doesn't just win fights. He makes sure his opponents don't survive them. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. So what do you do? I cooperate. I sign whatever they want. I go home, heal, have the baby. And while I'm doing all that, I gather real evidence, documentation, witnesses, financial records. I build a case so airtight that even Blake's lawyers can't dismantle it. That could take months. Then it takes months. I've been silent for 4 years. What's a few more months of strategizing? But even as Claire spoke, doubt gnawed at her. Was she being strategic or was she being a coward? Was she protecting her baby or protecting herself from the terrifying reality of having nothing? Sometimes the difference between wisdom and weakness is just perspective and timing. Dr. Cross returned at noon to discharge Claire. As she signed the release forms, the doctor slipped her a business card. Tyler Ramsey. He's a divorce attorney who specializes in complex cases involving power imbalances. He works on sliding scale fees. Call him when you're ready. Thank you, Claire whispered. One more thing. Cross added quietly. I documented everything in your medical records. The burn patterns, the stress indicators, the defensive wounds on your hands where you tried to catch yourself. If you end up in court, these records can help. They tell a story Blake can't rewrite. Claire drove home in the BMW Blake had given her for her birthday. She remembered being excited about the car, thinking it meant he still cared. Now she recognized it for what it was, another chain in the golden cage. The mansion looked perfect in afternoon sunlight. Pristine white walls, manicured gardens, the ocean stretching beyond. A prison that looked like paradise. Inside, she found roses in every room, 24 in the entrance, another dozen in the bedroom, more in the nursery they'd been preparing. A note from Blake read, I'm sorry you're hurting as rest and recover. I'll take care of everything. Claire looked at the roses, their beauty grotesque in context. He'd take care of everything. That was the problem. Blake took care of everything by eliminating problems, and Claire was starting to look like a problem he needed to solve. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of calculated normalcy. Blake played the devoted husband perfectly. He brought her breakfast in bed, hired a nurse to change her bandages, and told everyone who asked that his wife was recovering beautifully from a tragic accident. Claire played along. She smiled when he touched her belly. She thanked him for his concern. She became the picture of a grateful wife whose husband saved her from her own clumsiness. But privately, she was documenting everything. She'd set up a cloud storage account Blake couldn't access. Every night after he fell asleep, she photographed bank statements, emails, text messages. She recorded their conversations on her secret phone. She built a digital fortress of evidence. One piece at a time, Vanessa visited regularly, always with her laptop, always ready to help organize the growing file of Blake's misconduct. They worked in whispers, in bathroom where Claire ran the shower to mask their voices, in the brief moments when Blake left for the office. I found something, Vanessa said one afternoon, pulling up her laptop. Remember Blake's business partner, Garrett Pierce? He was kind to me at the party. He's more than kind. He's disgusted. I reached out to him through a mutual contact. He's willing to testify that Blake and Sienna planned your accident. He heard them discussing it the week before. Hope flared. He'll go on record. Not yet. He needs assurances his own career won't be destroyed. Blake owns 40% of the company, but Garrett owns 30%. They're co-founders. If Garrett speaks out, Blake will try to force him out. So we're still stuck. Not stuck. Building. I also connected with Patricia Wells. She's compiling her own evidence. Blake did similar things to her. Financial manipulation, gaslighting, public humiliation. She settled because she had no choice, but she kept copies of everything. Claire felt pieces aligning, a case forming from fragments. How long until we have enough? A month, maybe 2. We need financial records showing his control, medical documentation of your injuries, witness testimony, and the video I took. Together, it's undeniable. A month, Claire repeated. She was 32 weeks pregnant now. Her due date approached like a deadline in more ways than one. That evening, Blake came home early. Claire heard his car in the driveway and quickly closed her laptop, shoving it under the bed. He found her in the nursery, folding baby clothes. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The burns are healing." He sat beside her, his hand on her knee. The touch felt possessive rather than affectionate. "I've been thinking about names. If it's a boy, I want to name him Blake Jr. We discussed this. I wanted something more unique. Blake Jr. maintains legacy. It's important in my family." "Our family," Claire wanted to say, but she bit her tongue. "Choose your battles." "What if it's a girl?" she asked instead. "Then we'll try again for a boy." He said it casually, as if her body was a manufacturing plant for his desired outcome. Claire folded another onesie, keeping her hands busy so they wouldn't shake. "Blake, I've been thinking. After the baby comes, I'd like to go back to work. Maybe part-time, something flexible." His hand tightened on her knee. "We've discussed this. Your job is here, raising our child, managing the household. You're not equipped for the working world anymore. You've been out too long. I ran a nonprofit with 12 employees and a $500,000 budget. Past tense, you ran it. Now you're a mother. That's enough. What if it's not enough for me?" His expression shifted, warmth replaced by something colder. "Are you ungrateful, Claire? After everything I provide, most women would be thrilled to live this life. I'm not most women, I'm your wife, and I'm allowed to have ambitions beyond folding laundry. Your ambition nearly killed our child when you got too stressed and fell into a fire," he said quietly. "Maybe you should focus on stability instead of reinventing yourself." There it was, the threat beneath every conversation. Step out of line, and he'd weaponize the fire, paint her as unstable, dangerous, unfit. Claire set down the baby clothes. "I'm tired. I'm going to rest." "Good idea." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that felt like ownership being claimed. "I'll bring dinner up later." Alone in the bedroom, Claire retrieved her hidden phone and texted Vanessa, "I can't do this much longer. Every day with him makes me feel crazy. Maybe I am unstable." Vanessa's response came quickly. "You're not crazy. You're being gaslit by an expert. Hold on. We're almost there." But almost wasn't fast enough. Claire could feel the walls closing in, the cage getting smaller. Every day, Blake acted more confident, more controlling, as if he knew something she didn't. That night, she couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she got up to use the bathroom and found Blake's laptop open in his study. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, an empty whiskey glass beside him. Claire knew she shouldn't. It was risky, potentially disastrous. But opportunity rarely announces itself politely. She opened his email. The first message made her blood freeze. From Blake to Sienna, dated 3 days ago. "The plan is working perfectly. C is completely isolated, no job, no money, increasingly dependent. After the baby, we'll have her evaluated. Postpartum depression is common, expected even. One psychiatric hold, and we'll have grounds for sole custody. Then she's out of our lives completely." Claire's hands shook so hard she could barely scroll. More emails revealed the full scope. Blake had been planning this for months. The affair wasn't spontaneous passion. It was strategic replacement. Every kind gesture, every show of concern, was manipulation designed to trap her. She photographed every email with her secret phone, hands trembling, heart racing. 20 emails, 30, 40, a complete record of conspiracy. Then Blake stirred. Claire froze, phone hidden behind her back, standing in the middle of his study with no plausible excuse for being there. His eyes opened. "Claire, what are you doing?" "I couldn't sleep. I thought I heard something." He sat up slowly, studying her face. "You look terrified. What's wrong? What?" "Nothing, just pregnancy insomnia." He stood, moving toward her. "You're lying. You're hiding something." "I'm not." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "What's behind your back?" "Blake, you're hurting me. Show me." Now, Claire's mind raced. If he found the phone, found the emails, everything was over. He'd destroy the evidence, destroy her credibility, take the baby. She pulled out the phone, but in one desperate motion, dropped it into the nearby trash can filled with shredded paper. "Happy," she said, voice shaking. "It's just my phone. I was checking the time." Blake released her wrist and retrieved the phone from the trash. Her regular phone. not the secret one still hidden in her bathrobe pocket. Go back to bed. Claire, you are not well. She fled, hard hammering, knowing how close she'd come to complete disaster. In the bedroom, she lay in the dark, both phones now hidden under the mattress, and felt her baby kick. Strong, insistent, alive. Soon, she whispered. I promise, soon. But soon was relative, and time was running out faster than she'd realized. The next morning, Blake left early for the office. Claire waited 30 minutes to ensure he was really gone, then called Tyler Ramsey, the attorney Dr. Cross had recommended. I need help, she said when he answered, and I need it to be invisible until I'm ready to move. Tell me everything, Tyler said. And Mrs. Hutchinson, whatever you're feeling right now, you're not alone anymore. For the first time in months, Claire believed it might be true. Tyler Ramsey's office was in a modest building in Culver City, far from the gleaming towers where Blake's lawyers worked. Claire had told Blake she had a prenatal appointment. She'd become an expert liar by necessity. Tyler was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with kind eyes and a desk covered in case files. Tell me everything, he said. Don't leave anything out. For 90 minutes, Claire talked. The gaslighting, the financial control, the affair, the fire. She showed him the emails she'd photographed, the video Vanessa had recorded, the medical records Dr. Cross had provided. Tyler reviewed everything methodically. This is strong, really strong. But Mrs. Hutchinson, I need to be honest. Blake has resources we can't match. He can drag this out for years, bury you in legal fees, make your life hell. So I should give up. No, I'm saying we need to be strategic. Right now, you're financially dependent on him. That's your biggest vulnerability. Before we file anything, we need to establish your independence. How he controls every account. We petition for emergency spousal support and temporary custody arrangements. We document his abuse and present it to a judge before he knows we're coming. It's called an ex parte motion, done without his presence. If we can get temporary orders in place, you'll have resources to fight. Will it work? Depends on the judge. Some are sympathetic to abuse victims. Others believe in preserving marriages at all costs. Tyler leaned forward. But here's what concerns me most. Those emails you found, they reference having you psychiatrically evaluated after the baby's born. If Blake gets a doctor to say you're unstable, he could get sole custody. Claire's blood ran cold. He'd take my baby. He'd try. So we need to move first. File for separation, establish temporary custody, get you set up in a safe location before the baby comes. I'm due in 5 weeks. Then we need to move fast. Can you stay with your friend Vanessa? Yes, but Blake will find me. He'll be legally prohibited from contact once we file a restraining order. If he violates it, he goes to jail. Even powerful men don't want that publicity. For the first time, Claire saw a path forward. Narrow, dangerous, but real. What do I need to do? Gather every piece of evidence you can. Empty any accounts you have access to, even if they're joint. Under California law, you're entitled to half of all marital assets. And most importantly, keep him thinking everything is normal until we're ready to file. Claire left Tyler's office with a plan. It felt fragile, held together by hope and determination, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. That evening, Garrett Pierce called her directly. His voice was urgent. Claire, we need to talk. In person. Tomorrow. Don't tell Blake. They met at a coffee shop in Venice Beach, far from anywhere Blake or his associates would frequent. Garrett looked exhausted, like a man wrestling with his conscience and losing. I heard things, he said without preamble, about the fire, about Blake's plans. I can't be part of this anymore. What did you hear? Blake and Sienna talking in his office 3 days before the party. They were discussing you. Sienna said you were becoming a problem, threatening to expose the affair. Blake said he'd handle it, that the party would be the perfect opportunity. Claire's hands tightened around her coffee cup. They planned it. I didn't think he meant violence. I thought maybe public humiliation, something to keep you quiet. But after what happened, I realized how far Blake is willing to go. Garrett paused, struggling with words. I've known Blake for 8 years. We built this company together. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing people as people. Everyone became assets or obstacles. Will you testify or tell a court what you heard? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. If I do, Blake will destroy me. He'll force me out of the company, sue me for breach of partnership agreement, ruin my reputation in the industry. So that's a no. That's a I need time to figure out how to protect myself before I can protect you. He met her eyes. But Claire, I want you to know, I'm trying. I'm documenting everything, securing my own evidence. When the time comes, I'll stand with you. I just need to make sure I'm still standing afterward. It wasn't the immediate ally Claire hoped for, but it was something. Another piece in her growing case. 2 days later, everything accelerated. Claire was at Vanessa's apartment, organizing evidence on her laptop. When her phone rang, Blake's name flashed on the screen. Where are you? His voice was tight with controlled fury. At Vanessa's. I told you this morning. I know what you told me. I also know you met with Garrett Pierce yesterday. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Claire's blood turned to ice. Blake, come home now. We need to discuss your increasingly erratic behavior. I'm not coming home until we talk about your affair and your plans to take my baby. Silence. Whoa. Then, quietly, what are you talking about? I found your emails. Blake, I know everything. The planning, the conspiracy with Sienna, the psychiatric evaluation you're arranging. I know. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more calculating. Claire, you're clearly having a breakdown. It's sad, really. The stress of pregnancy has made you delusional. But don't worry, I'm going to get you help. I have proof, emails, videos, witnesses. You're not going to gaslight me anymore. Whatever you think you have won't matter. I have the best lawyers in California. They'll prove you're an unfit mother having psychotic episodes. The fire was just the beginning of your unraveling. Everyone will see it. We'll see what a court says. A court. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Claire, Adama, do you have any idea how courts work? They favor stable parents with resources. You have nothing. No body, no money, no credibility. I have everything. This is a fight you can't win. Watch me. She hung up, hands shaking so violently she dropped the phone. Vanessa grabbed her shoulders. Hey, breathe. We knew this was coming. He knows, Vanessa. He knows I'm building a case. He's going to move against me. Then we move faster. Call Tyler. File today. But before Claire could dial, her phone rang again. Not Blake this time. An unknown number. Mrs. Hutchinson. A male voice. Professional. Unfamiliar. This is Detective Frank Morrison with LAPD. We need you to come to the station. There's been an incident involving Garrett Pierce. The world tilted. What kind of incident? His car went off Pacific Coast Highway last night. He's alive, but seriously injured. He's asking for you. Claire and Vanessa rushed to the hospital. They found Garrett in ICU, his head bandaged, machines beeping around him. His face was swollen, barely recognizable. Claire, he whispered when she approached. It wasn't an accident. The brakes, someone cut them. He tried to kill me. Who called? Blake. Has to be Blake. I was going to testify. He knew. A nurse entered to check vitals, giving them a sharp look. He needs rest. You should go. Outside the ICU, Detective Morrison waited. Mr. Pierce claims his brakes were tampered with. We're investigating. But so far, we can't find evidence of foul play. It's possible he fell asleep at the wheel. That section of PCH is dangerous at night. It wasn't an accident, Claire insisted. My husband threatened him. Do you have proof of that threat? No, but then I can't help you. Without evidence, it's just speculation. Morrison's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Hutchinson, if you're in danger, there are resources, restraining orders, protective services. I know, I'm working on it, but the message was clear. Even the police couldn't protect her without proof, and Blake was excellent at covering his tracks. That night, Claire made her decision. She called Tyler Ramsey at midnight. File everything, tomorrow. I don't care if we're not ready. He tried to kill Garrett. I could be next. Okay, well, so Tyler said, okay, I'll prepare the emergency motions tonight. Tomorrow morning, we file for separation, custody, restraining order, everything. But Claire, once we do this, there's no going back. Blake will come at you with everything he has. Let him come. I'm done running. She hung up and placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. 8 months pregnant, burned, terrified, and finally ready to fight. Sometimes the only way out of the fire is straight through it. The courthouse opened at 8 a.m. Claire and Tyler were first in line. Emergency motions in family court moved quickly when domestic violence was involved. By 9 a.m., they stood before Judge Sandra Brennan, a stern woman in her 60s who'd seen every variation of marital warfare. Tyler presented their case systematically. The email showing Blake's conspiracy, the video of Sienna pushing Claire into the fire, medical records documenting her injuries, financial statements showing Blake's complete control, Garrett's statement about the conversation he'd overheard, recorded from his hospital bed. Your Honor, Tyler concluded, Blake Hutchinson has engaged in a pattern of abuse, manipulation, and conspiracy designed to gain sole custody of the couple's unborn child. We're requesting emergency separation, temporary sole custody to Mrs. Hutchinson, a restraining order preventing Mr. Hutchinson from contact, and immediate access to 50% of all marital assets. Judge Brennan reviewed the documents in silence. Finally, she looked up. Where is Mr. Hutchinson? We filed ex parte. Your Honor, he has no knowledge of these proceedings. That's highly irregular, but legal when there's credible fear of retaliation, which, given Mr. Pierce's accident and these emails, we believe is substantial. The judge studied the video of the fire incident 3 times. This clearly shows assault. Has Mrs. Drake been charged? Not yet. The police classified it as an accident based on Mr. Hutchinson's statement. I see, Judge Brennan made notes. I'm granting temporary orders. Mrs. Hutchinson has sole physical custody of the unborn child. Mr. Hutchinson is prohibited from contact except through attorneys. He will not approach Mrs. Hutchinson's residence, workplace, or known associates. I'm ordering the immediate release of $50,000 from marital accounts to Mrs. Hutchinson for living expenses and legal fees. Full hearing scheduled in 30 days. The gavel struck. Claire felt her knees weaken with relief. She had protection. She had money. She had a chance. They were in Tyler's car heading to Vanessa's apartment when Blake called. Claire let it go to voicemail. The message was brief and chilling. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Within hours, Blake's response began. His legal team filed counter motions claiming Claire had fabricated evidence, that her accusations were products of pregnancy-induced psychosis, that she was an unfit mother already harming the child through stress. They released a statement to the press. Blake Hutchinson is devastated by these false accusations from his mentally unstable wife. He's committed to getting her the help she needs while protecting their unborn child. The media frenzy was immediate. Tech CEO's pregnant wife files shocking abuse claims, battle over unborn heir, mansion, millions, and madness. Every outlet ran the story. Some sided with Claire, pointing to the video evidence. Others suggested a woman scorned seeking revenge. The court of public opinion was divided, messy and invasive. Claire watched it all from Vanessa's apartment, feeling exposed in ways she'd never imagined. Strangers dissected her marriage, her choices, her credibility. Photos of her and Blake from happier times circulated online with captions questioning what really happened. Turn it off, Vanessa said, closing Claire's laptop. None of that matters. What matters is you're safe. But safety was relative. That evening, Sienna Drake appeared on a sympathetic podcast, tearful and convincing. I blame myself, she said, voice breaking. I should have seen the signs of Claire's instability earlier. That night at the party, she was paranoid, accusatory. When she stumbled near the fire, I tried to grab her, tried to help, but she pulled away. It was horrifying. And now she's trying to destroy Blake's life because she can't accept that their marriage failed. The podcast went viral. Sienna's version of events was polished, sympathetic, designed to flip the narrative. Claire watched it in horror. She's good. She's really good. She's a liar, Vanessa corrected. And we'll prove it. Tyler's already filed charges with the DA. The video speaks for itself. But would it? Claire wasn't sure anymore. She'd learned that truth and perception were different things, and Blake was a master of shaping perception. 3 days later, Claire went into early labor. Stress had triggered contractions at 35 weeks. Vanessa rushed her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where Dr. Cross took over her care. "The baby's coming," Dr. Cross said after examination. "We're at 35 weeks, which is borderline, but your stress levels make continuing pregnancy dangerous. We're going to deliver." "Is Blake allowed to be here?" Claire asked, suddenly terrified of seeing him. "The restraining order prevents him from your room without your permission, but he has parental rights once the baby's born. We can't prevent him from seeing his child." 12 hours later, Claire delivered a baby girl, 6 pounds, healthy lungs, perfect. She named her Grace, because sometimes redemption comes in small packages. Blake arrived at the hospital within an hour of the birth. Security prevented him from Claire's room, but he could see Grace through the nursery window. Claire watched him on the monitor, seeing his face as he looked at his daughter for the first time. His expression was unreadable. Not joy, not love, something colder. Calculation. That night, Blake's lawyers filed emergency motions for shared custody, claiming Claire's ongoing mental health crisis made her unfit for sole custody. They requested court-mandated psychiatric evaluation and proposed a custody schedule where Blake would have Grace 50% of the time. "He can't do that," Claire said when Tyler explained. "Grace is 3 days old and she needs to be with me, too." "He can try. The hearing is in 2 weeks and we'll fight it. But Claire, you need to prepare for the possibility of shared custody. California law favors both parents having access, even when one parent tried to kill the other. We have to prove that, and Blake's lawyers are good at creating reasonable doubt." Claire held Grace in her arms, feeling the baby's weight, her warmth, her absolute dependence. This tiny person trusted her completely, and Claire had to find a way to keep that trust sacred. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal preparation. Tyler deposed witnesses, compiled evidence, built their case. Vanessa wrote an investigative piece for her publication detailing Blake's pattern of abuse, though her editors were terrified of libel suits. Garrett, recovering from his accident but still hospitalized, provided a video deposition. His memory was affected by the brain injury, but he remembered enough. Blake and Sienna planning something, Claire being discussed as an obstacle, the implication of premeditation. Patricia Wells also came forward publicly, breaking her NDA. "Blake Hutchinson tried to ruin me when I wouldn't sleep with him," she told reporters. "He destroyed my reputation, my career, my savings. When I see what he's doing to his wife, I recognize the pattern. He eliminates anyone who threatens his image." The dam was breaking. Other women began reaching out with their own stories of Blake's manipulation, coercion, and retaliation. Not all were willing to go public, but the whisper network grew loud enough to matter. Still, Blake's resources were formidable. He'd hired crisis management experts who spun every revelation into proof of Claire's vindictiveness. "A woman scorned," they said, weaponizing Me Too to destroy an innocent man. The custody hearing arrived like a storm. Judge Brennan's courtroom was packed with media, observers, and advocates on both sides. Blake sat with his legal team, looking every inch the wronged husband. Calm, concerned, reasonable. Claire sat with Tyler, holding Grace, determined to show the judge that she was stable, capable, devoted. For 6 hours, lawyers argued. Blake's team presented psychiatrists who, without ever examining Claire, testified about postpartum psychosis and delusional thinking. They showed photos of Claire looking exhausted, disheveled, stressed, arguing this proved unfitness. Tyler countered with Dr. Cross's testimony, with the video evidence, with Garrett's statement. He systematically dismantled Blake's fiction. Finally, Judge Brennan called for closing statements. Blake's lawyer stood by. "Your Honor, Blake Hutchinson is a devoted father who wants nothing more than to co-parent his daughter. His wife's accusations, while emotionally compelling, lack definitive proof. This court should not punish a father based on speculation and conspiracy theories. We request shared custody, 50-50 placement, allowing Grace to know both her parents." Tyler stood. "Your Honor, Blake Hutchinson is a dangerous man who has engaged in witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit assault. The video evidence is clear. The medical records are undeniable. Every objective witness supports Mrs. Hutchinson's account. To grant this man custody would be to endanger an innocent child. We request sole legal and physical custody to Miss Hutchinson, with supervised visitation for Mr. Hutchinson pending criminal investigation. Judge Brennan reviewed her notes. The room held its breath. "I've seen a lot of difficult cases," she finally said, "but this one is particularly troubling. The evidence presented suggests a pattern of coercive control and potential violence. However, the law requires me to consider the child's best interests, which includes meaningful relationships with both parents when safe." Claire's heart sank. "Therefore," the judge continued, "I am granting sole legal custody to Mrs. Hutchinson. She will make all major decisions regarding Grace's education, medical care, and upbringing. Mr. Hutchinson will have supervised visitation 2 hours per week at a neutral location until the criminal investigation into the fire incident concludes. If he is cleared of wrongdoing, we will revisit custody arrangements. If he is charged, this court will consider termination of parental rights." The gavel struck. Claire exhaled. Not perfect, but victory enough. Grace would stay with her. Blake couldn't take her baby. Blake's expression didn't change, but his lawyer immediately filed notice of appeal. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Claire made a brief statement, Tyler beside her, Grace in her arms. "I'm grateful to Judge Brennan for protecting my daughter. To every woman who came forward to share their experiences with Blake Hutchinson, thank you. You gave me courage when I had none. This isn't over." But today, justice took a small step forward. The clip played on every news network that evening. That night, in Vanessa's apartment, Claire finally allowed herself to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it felt like physical weightlifting. "You did it," Vanessa said softly. "You got out." "Not yet," Claire replied. "He'll appeal. He'll fight. This could go on for years. Then we fight for years. But Claire, you're not in that house anymore. You're not under his control. You're free. Free." The word felt foreign and wonderful. 2 days later, the DA's office announced charges against both Blake Hutchinson and Sienna Drake. Assault, conspiracy, witness tampering. The criminal case would proceed parallel to the custody battle. Blake was arrested at his office. Handcuffs visible to every employee. The photo made front pages everywhere. The criminal trial lasted 6 weeks. It became a media sensation, dissected on court TV, debated in think pieces, analyzed by legal experts. Blake Hutchinson's fall from grace was spectacular and public. The prosecution presented damning evidence. The video of Sienna pushing Claire, the emails showing premeditation, Garrett's testimony, Patricia Wells's account of Blake's pattern of abuse, financial records proving Blake's attempts to isolate Claire. Blake's defense argued that Sienna acted alone, that Blake was guilty only of being a distracted husband who didn't notice his wife's distress. They painted him as ambitious but not criminal. Sienna, facing her own charges, made a calculated decision. She turned state's witness. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she testified against Blake. "He told me Claire was the only thing standing between us," she said on the stand. "He said if something happened to her, something that looked accidental, we'd be free. He suggested the fire pit, said no one would question a pregnant woman stumbling." Her testimony was devastating. Blake's lawyers tried to discredit her, calling her a scorned mistress seeking revenge. But the emails corroborated everything she said. The jury deliberated for 9 hours, guilty on all counts. Blake Hutchinson was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The judge was harsh in her remarks. "You used your wealth and power to terrorize your wife, endanger your unborn child, and corrupt others into your schemes. This court believes in rehabilitation, but it also believes in consequences. Your actions were calculated, cruel, and unforgivable." Sienna received 8 years for assault and conspiracy. Claire watched the sentencing from the gallery, Grace sleeping in her arms. She felt no triumph, only exhaustion and relief. It was over. Finally, truly over. The civil case followed. Blake's assets were frozen pending division. The court awarded Claire the Malibu house, half the company stock, substantial child support, and damages for emotional distress. The settlement totaled $68 million. She didn't want revenge. She wanted security. And now, finally, she had it. 6 months after the trial, Claire stood in her new home. Not the Malibu mansion, which she'd sold immediately, but a modest house in Pasadena with a yard where Grace could play. 3 bedrooms, nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed wealth. She'd started working again, consulting for nonprofit organizations helping domestic violence survivors. She'd founded a small advocacy group called Phoenix Rising, using her story and resources to support women leaving dangerous situations. Vanessa visited often, bringing takeout and companionship. Garrett, recovered from his injuries though walking with a cane, joined Claire's organization as a volunteer. His career had suffered, but his conscience was clear. Dr. Cross stopped by occasionally, always with a toy for Grace, always with quiet encouragement for Claire. "How are you really doing?" she asked one afternoon. Claire was honest. "Some days are hard. I still have nightmares about the fire. I jump when the doorbell rings unexpectedly. I overanalyze every man I meet, looking for warning signs. I'm in therapy twice a week. That's normal. Trauma doesn't disappear just because you're safe. But I am safe. Grace is safe. That's what matters. And you're building something meaningful from what happened. That's remarkable." Claire looked at Grace, now 8 months old, laughing at dust motes in afternoon sunlight. Perfect, innocent, unaware of the darkness that had preceded her birth. "I want her to grow up knowing that women don't have to accept abuse," Claire said. "That silence isn't strength. That asking for help isn't weakness. If my story helps even one person leave a dangerous situation, everything I went through will mean something." That evening, Claire's phone rang. An unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Hutchinson," a young woman's voice, uncertain. "My name is Rebecca. I saw your interview last month about leaving your husband. I'm in a similar situation. I don't know who else to call. Can you help me?" Claire felt something settle in her chest. Purpose, oh, yes, she said. "I can help. Tell me everything." They talked for 2 hours. Claire provided resources, connected Rebecca with lawyers, offered temporary housing through Phoenix Rising's network. By the time they hung up, Rebecca was crying, but with relief rather than despair. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered. "You saved my life." "No," Claire replied. "You're saving your own life. I'm just holding the door open." After the call, Claire walked to Grace's room and watched her daughter sleep. The baby's breathing was steady, peaceful, trusting. Claire thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, silent, trapped, convinced she deserved the treatment she received. That woman felt like a stranger now. The fire had burned away more than just her skin. It had burned away the illusions, the false peace, the carefully constructed lies she'd told herself about love and loyalty. What remained was harder but real, scarred but stronger. She looked at her left arm, where the burn scars were visible, even in dim light. For months she'd hidden them, worn long sleeves, felt ashamed of these marks of her powerlessness. Now she saw them differently. Evidence, proof, reminders that she'd walked through fire and survived. Sometimes the only way to freedom is through flames, and sometimes from the ashes. A phoenix rises. 2 years later, Claire stood outside Calipatria State Prison in California's Imperial Valley. The desert sun beat down mercilessly, appropriate for a place designed to contain monsters. She'd debated this visit for months. Tyler advised against it. Vanessa thought she was crazy. But something in Claire needed closure that no verdict could provide. Grace was with Vanessa for the day. Claire wouldn't expose her daughter to this place. To him. The visiting room was sterile, monitored, safe. Blake entered in prison blues, looking diminished. Prison had stripped away the polish, the expensive suits, the armor of wealth. What remained was just a man, aging badly. Eyes harder than she remembered. They sat across from each other, separated by a table bolted to the floor. "Why are you here?" Blake asked. His voice lacked the smooth confidence she'd once found attractive. "I wanted to see you. To gloat." "No." Claire studied him. This man she'd loved, feared, finally escaped. "I wanted to understand. Why did you do it?" "The affair I could understand. Terrible but comprehensible. But trying to kill me, Trying to take Grace? Why, Blake was silent for a long moment. You were weak. You made me look weak. I built an empire, and you wanted me home for dinner, like some suburban nobody. So you decided to destroy me. I decided to upgrade. He said it casually, as if discussing a software update. Sienna was ambitious, driven, didn't burden me with emotional needs. You were a phase I'd outgrown. I was your wife, the mother of your child. You were an obstacle. The words hung between them, honest and horrifying. Claire felt something release inside her. She'd wondered for 2 years if she'd somehow caused this, if being a better wife, less needy, more understanding would have changed the outcome. Now she knew. Nothing she could have done would have mattered. Blake's cruelty wasn't response to her failures. It was just who he was. Do you feel anything? She asked. Remorse, regret, anything. He considered the question. I regret getting caught. I regret that Sienna testified against me. I regret 13 more years in this place. But you were collateral damage in a larger plan. Claire stood. Thank you. For what? For showing me exactly who you are. For years I made excuses for you, rationalized your behavior, blamed myself. Now I know. You're just broken, and that's not my responsibility to fix. She walked toward the exit. Blake called after her. Grace will want to know her father someday. I'll tell her how her mother destroyed our family. Claire turned back. Grace knows her father tried to kill her mother before she was born. She knows her mother survived and built a life focused on helping others survive. When she's old enough to understand, she'll know that families aren't defined by biology, but by love. And you don't know how to love anything except power. Outside, the desert air felt clean despite the heat. Claire drove back to Los Angeles, windows down, music loud, feeling lighter than she had in years. That evening, Phoenix Rising held its annual fundraiser. 200 guests, raising money to support domestic violence survivors with legal fees, housing, and resources. Claire gave a speech that was carried on local news. 2 years ago, I was trapped in a marriage that nearly killed me. She said, I believed I had no options, no power, no future. I was wrong. With help from friends, lawyers, medical professionals, and other survivors, I found my way out. Tonight, we celebrate everyone who has made that same journey, and we recommit to helping those still searching for the exit. The applause was thunderous. After the event, Claire returned home to find Grace asleep on Vanessa's lap. How did it go? Vanessa asked. The fundraiser was perfect. We raised $200,000. I meant the prison visit. Claire thought about Blake's face, his words, his absolute inability to understand why his actions were wrong. It went exactly as it needed to. I got closure. And I realized I don't need anything from him. Not apologies, not explanations, not redemption. I'm building something new, something that matters. He's just a man in a cell who made terrible choices. Vanessa smiled. You've come so far. We both have. None of this would have been possible without you. Yeah, well, that's what sisters do. Vanessa stood carefully, transferring sleeping Grace to Claire's arms. I'm going to head out. Same time next week. Actually, Claire said, I have a date next week. Would you mind watching Grace? Vanessa's eyes widened. A date with who? A man I met at Phoenix Rising. He volunteers with our legal aid program. His name is Marcus. He's kind, patient, and remarkably well-adjusted considering he survived his own nightmare marriage. And you're ready for this? Claire looked at Grace sleeping peacefully, at the home she'd built with her own money and choices, at the life she'd constructed from ruins. I'm ready to try. Not because I need someone to complete me, but because I'm complete enough to share my life if I choose. That, Vanessa said, is exactly the right answer. After her friend left, Claire carried Grace to her room and laid her in the crib. She stood watching her daughter breathe, this miracle born from darkness. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, silent, compliant, convinced that keeping the peace was worth losing herself. That woman had burned in the fire Blake and Sienna created. What emerged was scarred but whole, damaged but determined, changed but not broken. Claire walked to her own room and looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. Maybe for the first time in years. The burn scars on her arm were visible, raised tissue that would never fully fade. She used to hide them. Now she wore them openly, evidence that she'd survived, proof that fire transforms rather than destroys. Reminder that the only way out is through. She thought about Rebecca, the woman who'd called 2 years ago. Rebecca had left her abusive husband, rebuilt her life, and now volunteered with Phoenix Rising, helping other women make the same journey. She thought about Patricia Wells, who'd broken her NDA and was now writing a book about corporate abuse of power. She thought about Garrett Pierce, who'd lost part of his memory but gained back his integrity. She thought about all the women who'd reached out, shared their stories, found their voices. One fire had tried to destroy her, but from those flames, 1,000 lights had been lit. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, still on for next week? There's a new restaurant in Silver Lake I've been wanting to try. They supposedly have the best pasta in LA. She smiled and typed back, sounds perfect. Looking forward to it. No games, no strategy, no fear. Just simple honesty between two people who'd learned the hard way what they needed and wouldn't tolerate. Claire set down her phone and walked back to Grace's room. She sat in the rocking chair beside the crib, the same chair where she'd spent countless nights feeding her daughter, soothing her tears, singing soft lullabies. You're going to grow up in a different world than I did, Claire whispered to sleeping Grace. You'll never doubt your worth. You'll never accept less than you deserve. You'll never stay silent when something is wrong. Because I'll teach you that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every single time. Grace stirred slightly, smiled in her sleep, and settled back into dreams. Claire thought about the security footage from that terrible night 3 years ago. The timestamp, the flames, the fall, the man walking away. That video had been her evidence, her proof, her weapon in court. But it was also her origin story. The moment she stopped being Blake Hutchinson's wife and became herself, the fire didn't destroy her. It revealed her. And from those flames, she'd built something beautiful. Outside, the Los Angeles night glittered with possibility. Millions of people living their lives, making their choices, learning their lessons. Claire was one of them now. Not a victim, not a survivor, just a woman living fully and freely. She'd walked through fire and emerged transformed. And that, she thought, was the only ending that ever really mattered, the beginning of everything else.